My name is Claire, and I'm 28 years old. Picture pouring your heart and soul into a family that casts you out like refuse, branding you a disappointment for daring to dream beyond their suffocating small-town cage, only for them to call a decade later, demanding I owe them for a childhood they shattered with a single brutal rejection. They made their choice when they slammed the door on me at 18, leaving me with a cardboard box and a heart bleeding with grief so raw it felt like a living wound. I made mine when I refused their audacious demands, a fire of defiance blazing through 10 years of buried pain. This isn't about revenge. It's about consequences, about the suffocating silence of a family that erased me, the searing betrayal of their absence, and the incandescent freedom I clawed from the ashes of their scorn. This is the story of their heartless betrayal, my relentless survival, and the reckoning that set me free. I grew up in a modest brick house in a town where gossip was sharper than a blade, where the air carried my mother's rosewater perfume and the bitter tang of Dad's morning coffee, a fragile veneer over our family's rigid, unspoken rules. I was the youngest, the dreamer, the girl who hid novels under her pillow, my mind ablaze with cities and possibilities far beyond our sleepy streets, where the tallest ambition was to inherit the family hardware store. My older brother, Tom, 4 years my senior, was the golden child, his charm a spell that bought endless praise. He'd saunter through the house, leaving dishes piled high and promises broken, yet Mom's eyes glowed like stars when he spoke. And Dad's rare smiles, hard-won, fleeting, were his alone. I was the one who mowed the lawn until my hands blistered, helped Mom tend her prized roses until my fingers bled from thorns, and studied until my eyes burned red. But my straight A's and quiet sacrifices earned only fleeting nods, never pride. Tom's got big plans, Dad would say, his voice warm with a pride I'd never tasted, while my dreams of college, of a life beyond their store's dusty shelves, were dismissed as childish rebellion, a betrayal of their legacy. Every Sunday dinner, I'd sit in silence, my fork scraping against the plate, as they recounted Tom's latest escapades, a job he'd quit in a week, a flashy car he couldn't afford, while my college applications gathered dust on the kitchen counter, as invisible as I was in their eyes. Childhood memories were jagged shards, each cutting deeper into the wound of my neglect. At 8, I'd kneel beside Mom in the garden, dirt smudging my cheeks, her laughter soft as we planted tulips. A rare moment when I felt seen, my heart soaring. But Tom would burst in, demanding her attention with a story of some schoolyard triumph. And her smile would shift to him, brighter, warmer, leaving me with the weeds, my tulips forgotten. At 12, I won a poetry contest, my heart pounding as I handed Dad the certificate, craving his approval, a single spark of his pride. He glanced at it, muttered, "That's nice," then spent dinner praising Tom's mediocre football game, his voice alive with excitement, while my certificate lay abandoned on the table, a paper ghost. At 15, I stayed up all night perfecting a science fair project, my fingers cramped from gluing tiny stars to a model of the solar system. Mom promised she'd come, her voice airy with assurance, but she skipped it to drive Tom to a party. Her words final. He needs me more. I stood alone by my project, a first-place ribbon pinned to nothing, the ache of her absence a wound that throbbed for years. Those moments piled up, a quiet erosion of my place in their hearts, a slow suffocation of my spirit. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling's cracks, wondering what I had to do to be enough. If I was perfect, flawless grades, no trouble, always there, surely they'd see me. They never did. The betrayal came at 18, fresh out of high school, when I clutched an acceptance letter to a state university 4 states away. It wasn't prestigious, just a chance to escape, a lifeline to a world I'd only dreamed of in the pages of Jane Eyre. I slid it across the kitchen table, my heart pounding with fragile hope, my hands trembling as I waited for their reaction. Dad's face went blank, his eyes cold as stone, his voice a gavel slamming shut my future. "We're not paying for that," I pleaded, my voice cracking, tears burning my eyes. I'd get loans, work nights, anything to make it happen. but that was my mistake. Showing I was serious, that I'd dare choose myself over their plan for me to stay, marry a local boy, and fade into the hardware store's shadow. Mom's tears were fury, not sorrow. Her voice a blade slicing through me. "You're so ungrateful," she hissed, her words venomous, her face twisted with rage. "After everything we've done, you want to embarrass us in front of the whole town?" Then came the word that branded my soul: disappointment. "You're a profound disappointment to this family," she said, her eyes hard, unyielding, a jury-passing sentence. Dad pointed to the door, his voice a thunderclap in the silence. "If you think you're better than us, go. Don't come back." The quiet that followed was heavier than any scream, a suffocating void that swallowed my childhood, my home, my hope, leaving only a hollow ache where my family used to be. They gave me one cardboard box, a cruel allowance for a life I'd lived. I walked through the house, a ghost in my own memories, packing what little I could. Worn jeans, my dog-eared copy of Jane Eyre, a faded photo of me and Tom from a summer when he still laughed with me, his arms slung around my shoulders, his smile bright with a brotherly love I'd never see again. He stood in his doorway as I passed, arms crossed, his face a mask of indifference. Not a word spoken, not even goodbye. The grief hit like a tidal wave, a raw, aching loss that felt like mourning the living, their absence a wound that bled without end. Standing on the porch, clutching that box, staring at the closed door. I was 18 and utterly alone, my family alive but dead to me. The shame was crushing, a voice whispering I was unlovable, worthless if my own blood could discard me so easily. I climbed into my beat-up sedan, bought with savings from a summer job scooping ice cream, and drove, no destination, just away. The rearview mirror holding a life I could never return to. The weight of their rejection a chain around my heart, dragging me into the unknown. The first weeks were a haze of panic and desperation, a free fall into a world that didn't want me. I crashed on my high school friend Lila's couch, her kindness a lifeline I clung to with trembling hands. But I felt like an intruder, a burden in her cramped apartment with its peeling paint and creaking floors. Lying on her lumpy sofa, staring at the ceiling's water stains, my mind churned with fear, shame, and a gnawing question. Who was I without them? My body rebelled. Headaches throbbed like war drums. Sleep eluded me. My stomach twisted in knots that made eating a chore. My family wasn't just my family. They were my identity, my home, the roots I thought would hold me forever. Without them, I was adrift, a ship with no anchor in a storm that never ceased. College was a shattered dream. Missed deadlines, no money, just $200 in my pocket, scraped from odd jobs and late-night shifts. Survival was my only goal, a brutal necessity that consumed me. I landed a job washing dishes at a greasy diner, the smell of stale oil and burnt grease clinging to my skin. The pay barely covering a windowless room in a rundown building where the walls seemed to close in at night. The cook's temper was a daily gauntlet, his shouts, "Move faster, girl," echoing in my ears as I scrubbed pans, my dreams buried under the weight of just getting by. Each night I'd collapse onto a thin mattress, the silence of my room louder than the diner's chaos, the ache of rejection a constant companion. A ghost that whispered I'd never be enough. The years that followed were a relentless grind, a crucible that forged me in fire and pain. I worked 3 jobs: dishwasher, grocery store night stalker, cleaning houses. My hands raw from bleach, my body exhausted, surviving on instant noodles and day-old diner bread that tasted of defeat. Holidays were a knife to the heart. Christmas and Thanksgiving sharp reminders of the family table I was exiled from. The laughter I'd never share again. I'd turn off my phone, sit alone in my room. The silence deafening. The memory of Mom's rosewater scent and Dad's coffee a haunting perfume that lingered in my dreams. I became a shadow of myself, wary of letting anyone close. My trust in others as fragile as glass shattered by their betrayal. If my family could abandon me, anyone could. I turned into a people pleaser, terrified of giving anyone a reason to leave. My laughter forced, my heart guarded behind a wall I didn't know how to dismantle. Lila saw it, her eyes sharp with concern over coffee at the diner, her voice fierce with love. "You're carrying too much, Claire," she'd say, her hand squeezing mine. "You're enough." Her words were a spark in the dark, but I wasn't ready to believe them. Not yet. Not when the wound of rejection still bled. Romance was a battlefield I avoided, my heart too bruised to risk. At 19, I met Ethan, a barista with a crooked smile who'd slip me free coffee during my diner breaks. His warmth was a temptation, his easy laughter a balm, but when he asked me out, my chest tightened with panic. What if he saw the broken girl inside, the one my family threw away? I pushed him away, my excuses sharp, my walls higher than ever. "I'm just busy," I'd say, avoiding his eyes. But the truth was I couldn't bear another rejection. Lila pushed me to try, her voice gentle but firm. "You deserve love, Claire," she'd say, but I'd shake my head. The fear of abandonment, a chain I couldn't break. Ethan moved on, his smile fading from my life, and I buried the ache, telling myself love was a luxury I couldn't afford, not when survival demanded everything. My 20th birthday was the turning point, a day that shattered and remade me in a single searing moment. I was scrubbing dishes during a double shift, the diner's fluorescent lights buzzing like a swarm of angry bees, when a family came in. Mom, Dad, a daughter my age, celebrating her birthday with laughter and a towering chocolate cake, its candles flickering like the dreams I'd buried. Their pride in her, the way their eyes shone with love, was a blade to my chest, slicing open the wound of my exile. I stumbled to the back alley, leaned against a dumpster, its stench mixing with my tears, and sobbed. For the 18-year-old girl thrown out with a box, for the family I'd lost, for the love I'd never earned. The grief was a beast, clawing at my chest, its jaws tearing at the fragile threads of my hope. But through the tears, a new fire rose. Anger, cold and sharp, a defiance that burned away my victimhood like dry tinder. I was done letting their rejection define me, done being the girl who wasn't enough. That night, I vowed to build a life so radiant their dismissal would be a distant shadow, a life that screamed my worth in every achievement, every breath. Spite became my fuel, a fierce resolve to prove them wrong, to rise from the ashes of their verdict like a phoenix forged in pain. I enrolled in a night class at a community college, Intro to Computer Programming, while still working full-time, my body screaming for rest but my heart screaming louder for redemption. Exhausted, I'd drag myself to class, the fluorescent lights a harsh echo of the diner. But the logic of code, the act of building something from nothing, lit a fire in me I hadn't felt since childhood, when I'd lose myself in novels and dream of worlds beyond. I spent nights at the library, teaching myself from free online tutorials, my fingers flying over a borrowed laptop, the screen's glow a beacon in my darkness, a promise of something better. After a year, I had a small portfolio and started freelancing, designing websites for local shops, a bakery with warm scones, a bookstore with creaking shelves, a florist whose roses reminded me of Mom's garden, a bittersweet sting. My first $500 check was a fortune. Not just money, but proof I was more than their disappointment, a tangible defiance of their verdict. I poured every ounce of energy into it, working 80-hour weeks, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning need to rewrite my story, to carve my name into a world that had tried to erase me. Slowly, I built a small web design business, just me and my tiny apartment, now both home and office, its walls papered with sticky notes and dreams. The first years were brutal. Late nights, missed rent payments, the constant fear of failure a shadow that never left. I'd wake at 3 a.m., heart racing, convinced one bad client would unravel everything. But I was relentless, a warrior in a battle against my past, my hands trembling but my resolve ironclad. I landed bigger clients, a local gym, a small startup, a community center desperate for a digital facelift. Hired my first employee, Sam, a quiet coder with a dry wit who'd stay late to debug with me. His loyalty, a quiet gift. Then came Mia, a designer with a laugh that filled the office, who'd bring me coffee when I forgot to eat. Her kindness, a reminder I wasn't alone. My little operation grew into a software agency with 15 people, a real office with windows that let in light, a reputation for reliability that felt like a badge of honor. I bought a house in the city, a small but bright place with a garden where I planted roses, red and defiant. A nod to Mom's garden, but reclaimed as my own. A symbol of my survival, my triumph. Building a chosen family was harder, slower, a delicate act of trust that felt like walking on glass. Lila was my anchor, her late-night calls and fierce hugs pulling me through dark moments when the weight of my past threatened to crush me. "You're not invisible anymore," she'd say, her voice a lifeline, her apartment a safe harbor where we'd laugh over takeout, her belief in me a mirror reflecting my worth. Sam and Mia became my work family, their respect a balm for old wounds. Sam would slip me a note with a bad pun when I looked stressed, his quiet humor a gift. Mia would blast music during late-night projects, her energy infectious, her hugs fierce when I let my guard down. I started therapy, unraveling the trauma of being cast out. The sessions with Dr. Ellis a sanctuary where I could name the grief, the shame, the anger. "Your family's rejection wasn't about you," she'd say, her voice steady, her eyes kind. "It was their failure, not yours." Her words were a chisel, slowly breaking down the walls I'd built, teaching me my worth wasn't tied to their approval. 10 years after I drove away with that box, my life was unrecognizable. I was financially secure, a business owner, a woman who'd clawed her way from nothing. My scars a faint ache on quiet nights, but no longer my definition. I'd built a life on my terms, without them. Romance crept in cautiously, a flicker of hope I almost didn't trust. At 25, I met Noah, a graphic artist who worked with my agency, his quiet intensity and warm brown eyes disarming me. He'd linger after meetings, offering feedback on my designs, his voice soft but deliberate, his smile a challenge to my walls. One night, over coffee at a late-night cafe, he asked about my past, his gaze steady, not judging. I told him pieces, the box, the diner, the silence. And he listened, his hand brushing mine, a touch that felt like a promise. But fear gripped me. The old panic that he'd see the broken girl my family discarded and walk away. I pulled back, my voice sharp, my excuses flimsy. "I'm not ready for this." Noah didn't push, but his quiet persistence, texts with silly memes, coffee left on my desk, chipped away at my defenses. Lila urged me to let him in. "He's not them, Claire," she said, her voice fierce. "You deserve this." I wasn't sure I believed her, but Noah's patience, his gentle, "I'm here when you're ready," became a light in my darkness. A possibility I wasn't ready to extinguish. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, an unknown number with my hometown's area code, a jolt that sent my heart lurching, a reflex from a decade of silence. I was in my office, sunlight streaming through the windows, Mia's laughter echoing from the break room when I answered, my voice tight with dread. "Hello?" A pause, then her voice. Mom's, older, thinner, but unmistakable. A scar etched in my memory, reopening every wound I'd fought to heal. "Claire, is that you?" she asked, as if I were the one who'd vanished. A flicker of hope sparked, the old foolish dream of an apology, a reconciliation, but it died fast, crushed by the weight of her tone. She didn't ask how I was, didn't acknowledge the 10 years of silence that stretched between us like a canyon. She chattered about the weather, a neighbor I barely recalled, her voice a performance of warmth that rang hollow, a cheap costume over her true intent. Then came the pivot, sharp and shameless, a dagger to my chest. "We saw your company online," she said, Dad's gruff voice coaching her in the background, a low growl of expectation that made my skin crawl. "You've done well, Claire. We're so proud." The lie was a slap, a manipulative tactic to soften me, their pride a fiction crafted for my wallet. But we're in trouble. The hardware store's gone under. Tom's in debt, bad investments, you know. And we're about to lose the house. Our grandkids, Tom's kids, they don't deserve this. My grip tightened on the phone, my knuckles white, my breath shallow as she unveiled their plan, a demand so audacious it stole the air from my lungs. They wanted me to pay off the $150,000 left on their mortgage, clear Tom's $75,000 debt from his reckless schemes, and give Dad $50,000 to start a new business. A total of $275,000, itemized like a bill for a childhood they'd discarded with a single, brutal rejection. "It's the least you can do," she said. Her voice whiny, manipulative, a guilt trip honed to perfection. "After all we did for you." The nerve was staggering, a masterclass in delusion that ignited a fire in my chest, a decade of buried anger roaring to life like a wildfire. I saw the closed door, the cardboard box, Tom's silent indifference, the diner's fluorescent lights, the nights I cried myself to sleep, the years I fought to believe I was enough. "Why would I do that?" I asked, my voice low, trembling with a fury I could barely contain, my heart a drumbeat of rage and pain. She sounded shocked, as if my compliance was a given, her voice rising in disbelief, a shrill edge that grated against my nerves. "We're your family. We raised you. You owe us." That word, "owe," was a match to gasoline, setting my soul ablaze with a righteous anger I'd suppressed for too long. "Owe you?" I said, my voice shaking but cold, a blade honed by years of pain, sharp and unyielding. "You threw me out at 18 with a cardboard box because I wanted to go to college, because I dared to dream beyond your small, suffocating world. You called me a disappointment, told me never to come back, erased me from your lives like I was nothing. You didn't raise me to succeed. You discarded me like trash, left me to drown in shame and grief. I built this life in spite of you, not because of you. I clawed my way up from nothing, nights scrubbing dishes until my hands bled, days cleaning houses until my back ached, years of fear and loneliness so deep I thought I'd never survive it. While you let me vanish without a single call, not one birthday card, not one, 'Are you okay?' You're not calling your daughter. You're calling a bank and you think a fake 'we're proud' will unlock my wallet like some cheap key." The silence on the line was heavy, a chasm of their own making, a void where their love should have been. Dad's voice roared in the background, a bellow that sent a shiver down my spine. "Tell her she's a selfish brat." Mom's tone turned venomous, her words dripping with scorn, a venom I knew too well. "You're ungrateful, Claire. We gave you everything and this is how you repay us? You're nothing without us." The tiny hope I'd clung to, that fragile dream of reconciliation, shattered into a million pieces, replaced by a clarity as sharp as broken glass. They hadn't changed. They saw me as a resource, their love conditional on my compliance, their pride a lie to mask their greed. "No," I said, the word quiet but heavy, a thunderclap in my soul, cutting through a decade of pain like a blade through chains. "What?" she sputtered, her voice sharp with disbelief, as if my refusal was unthinkable, a betrayal of their script. "No," I repeated, stronger, my voice steady despite the tears burning my eyes, streaming down my cheeks in silent defiance. "I won't pay your mortgage. I won't clear Tom's debts. I won't fund Dad's schemes. The bank you're trying to reach closed 10 years ago when you shut me out of your lives, when you chose your pride over your daughter." I let the truth pour out, each word a release, a shedding of chains that had bound me for too long. "Do you know what it's like to grieve a family that's still alive? To mourn parents who chose their ego over their child? To wake up every day wondering why you weren't enough, why your dreams were a crime? You inflicted that on me, a wound that bled for years, a pain I carried through every job, every sleepless night, every moment I fought to believe I was worth something. You don't get to waltz back with an invoice for my childhood and pretend that wound doesn't exist. I've spent 10 years rebuilding what you broke, and I won't let you touch the peace I've earned with my own blood and tears." She made a choked sound. Tears, rage, I didn't care, my heart too full of my own truth to let her in. "I have a life now," I said, my voice calm, final, a declaration of my freedom, a vow to the girl I'd been. A chosen family who sees me, Leela, my team, people who value me for who I am, not what I can pay. A business I built from nothing, a house with a garden I planted, roses that bloom red with my defiance, a peace you can't imagine because you never gave it to me. You made your choice when you pointed to that door, when you branded me a disappointment. I'm making mine. Don't call again. I hung up, the click of the phone a door slamming shut forever, the silence that followed clean and liberating. A quiet I'd fought for with every tear, every sleepless night, every step away from their shadow. It was the sound of freedom, a melody of my own making, a song of survival and triumph. The fallout was a storm, a tempest I watched from a distance, like lightning beyond a thick glass wall, its fury unable to touch me. Tom didn't just text. He called, his voice a venomous growl, dripping with the entitlement I'd forgotten he wielded so effortlessly. "You think you're better than us, Claire?" He spat, his words a barrage of insults, accusing me of abandoning the family, of being jealous of his so-called success, his life a house of cards built on bad investments and unchecked ego. "You owe us," he said, echoing Mom, his tone a mirror of her manipulation. "You're nothing without us." The irony was a bitter laugh, a sharp twist of the knife. But I wasn't the scared girl he'd ignored a decade ago. "I'm everything without you," I said, my voice steady, cutting through his rage. "You stood there, Tom, watching me leave with that box, not a word, not a glance. You chose them then, and I choose myself now. Don't call me again." I hung up, my hands shaking but my heart resolute. His voice a fading echo of a brother I'd once loved but no longer knew. The town's backlash was relentless, a second exile orchestrated by whispers and glares. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't heard from in years flooded my phone with guilt trips, their voices thick with judgment, as if I were the one who'd betrayed them. "Be the bigger person, Claire," Aunt Linda texted, her words a sanctimonious jab, as if I hadn't spent a decade being bigger than their betrayal. "Family is everything," Uncle Ray called, his voice heavy with disappointment. As if I were the one who'd failed. Neighbors from my old town left voicemails, their pity laced with scorn. "Claire, how could you do this to your parents? They're struggling." The gossip spread like wildfire, old high school friends whispering at the grocery store, their eyes darting away when I passed, their words a chorus of condemnation. She turned her back on her family. Tom's friends, his loyal posse, took to social media. Their posts a vicious campaign of vague but cutting attacks. Some people forget where they came from, think they're too good for their roots. A local Facebook group filled with faces I'd once known became a battleground, posts calling me cold, selfish, a traitor to my blood. "Claire's always been trouble," one wrote, a former classmate who'd once borrowed my notes, her words a betrayal of their own. The public shaming was a tidal wave, threatening to drown the life I'd built. But I stood firm, my roots now in my own soil, my roses blooming in defiance. Work became a war zone, the stress of the call and the town's judgment bleeding into my days. My team noticed my distraction, my hands trembling as I typed, my mind replaying Mom's venom, Dad's bellow, Tom's accusations. My boss, Rachel, a sharp-eyed woman with a penchant for perfection, called me out in a meeting, her voice slicing through the fog of my thoughts. "You're off your game, Claire," she said, her tone cold, her eyes narrowing. "We can't afford mistakes." I nodded, swallowing the urge to scream that I was drowning, that my family's betrayal had cracked something fundamental inside me. that the town's scorn was a weight I could barely carry. I stayed late, fixing errors, my office a fortress of focus, but the pressure was relentless. Rachel's scrutiny a constant shadow. "You're not yourself," Sam said one night, his voice soft, his eyes kind. "Talk to us." I shook my head. The words caught in my throat, but Mia's hug, fierce and unasked, broke through, her laughter a lifeline. "We've got you, boss," she said. And for a moment, I believed her. Lila was my rock, storming into my apartment with takeout and rage, her eyes blazing with loyalty. "They're gaslighting you," she said, slamming a container of fried rice onto the table, her voice a thunderclap of truth. "They threw you out and now they're playing the victims? Screw them, Claire. You're a goddamn warrior." Her words were a fire, warming the cold corners of my heart, her presence a shield against the world's judgment. Dr. Ellis, my therapist, helped me unpack the call, framing it as a final test of my strength, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. "You said no to protect yourself," she said, her eyes kind but firm. "That's not selfishness. It's survival. You've built a life they can't touch." Her words were a chisel, carving away the last of my guilt, revealing the truth I'd fought for. I was enough, not because of them, but despite them. Noah became a quiet haven, his presence a challenge to my fears. After the call, he noticed my silence, his texts gentle but persistent. A meme of a cat with a sword, a note saying, "You're tougher than you think." One night, I let him in, sitting on my couch, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea, my voice trembling as I told him everything. The box, the diner, the silence, the call. He listened, his hands steady on mine, his eyes never leaving my face. "They didn't deserve you, Claire," he said, his voice soft but fierce. "But I see you." His words cracked something open, a warmth I hadn't felt in years, a possibility I was afraid to name. I didn't kiss him, not yet. But I let his hand stay. A promise I wasn't ready to break. The $275,000 they demanded stayed in my savings. A future for me, not them. A house expansion, a trip to Paris I'd dreamed of since reading A Movable Feast. A life I was building on my terms. I'd walk through my garden, my roses blooming red and defiant, their petals a testament to my survival, my triumph. The grief lingered, a shadow on quiet nights, a sadness for the family I'd wanted. Mom's rare laughter over tulips, Dad's hand steadying my bike, Tom's old smiles before he became a stranger. But it was buried under a profound relief, a freedom forged in fire, a peace they couldn't touch. My chosen family, Lila's fierce hugs, Sam's quiet loyalty, Mia's infectious laughter, Noah's steady presence, Dr. Ellis's wisdom, was my home now, a fortress built on love, not obligation. Those 10 years of silence weren't a sentence. They were a rebirth, a chrysalis that transformed me from a discarded girl into a woman who chose herself. One evening, nearly a year later, I stood in my garden, a glass of wine in hand, the city lights sparkling like stars beyond my fence, their glow a mirror of the fire in my chest. Lila sat beside me, her presence a comfort, her voice soft but fierce. "You did it, Claire," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "You chose yourself, and you won." I nodded, tears prickling my eyes, the fire in my heart now a warm glow of hope, a beacon of my own making. The closed door, the cardboard box, the silence of those 10 years. They were scars, but also proof of my strength, my survival, my triumph. I was no longer the invisible daughter, the discarded dreamer. I was Claire, business owner, friend, survivor, architect of a life no one could shake. What would you have done? Have you ever had to break free from a family that didn't see you? A world that tried to define you? Share your story, or tell me if I went too far. Thanks for hearing mine.